When you look at the biggest disruption facing your business today, Scott, you saw the choices: automation and AI, remote working, competitive landscape, inflation.
The macroeconomic environment. It's the biggest disruption right now.
How tough is it? And how does it apply to you specifically?
So in our business, it has a number of impacts. The first is a huge portion of our business is the ad business, and that market is so sensitive to the broader economic market. So that's a huge driver. And then everybody in media has now pivoted to streaming services, and the fact that consumers are now in much more challenging economic situation, that we're seeing the implications of that with respect to churn on the streaming side as well. So we're really experiencing it in multiple places, and then you have the broader economic effects of how it impacts the cable ecosystem. So that's the biggest challenge at the moment.
Do you think recession is inevitable?
I think it's highly likely.
Okay.
I mean, I do think
it's a little less than inevitable.
Right. I wouldn't want to go fully inevitable. I think my professors from college would be upset if I were up here pontificating about that. But and I do think we'll get to the other side of it, and it's all about how do we all kind of prepare and plan for to get through it, and then have to kind of continue to thrive when we get to the other side of it.
All right, so let me ask you, I mean, you've been BET president for 4 years. You're very familiar with this company.
Yes.
You were there before you took over that position. When you got to the company, talk to us, the BET brand, I think you said you saw risks ahead. You knew it couldn't just be cable.
That's right. When we were looking at BET, BET was in the situation that most legacy cable brands were, right? The cable landscape was declining, and audience was declining, revenue was declining, relevance was declining.
Right.
And the issue for us was that for BET to be BET, we weren't focused on the next couple of years. We were really saying that it's a singular entity. It plays a role in the Black community like no other platform. And we'd seen how other legacy media brands and other industries had really failed to kind of create a roadmap for growth of their business, and as a result diminished, and ultimately a lot of them perished. And we had this perspective that we had to set BET up to be a thriving company, not just in 5 years, but 10 years and 15 years. And so we focused on what did we have to do to accomplish that.
So let's talk about that. We've actually thrown up a slide, which I think is really, obviously relevant in terms of what you guys are doing. You've got this ecosystem, and everything, we see this at Bloomberg too, everything's got to feed one another.
That's right.
Tell us about
And that was really our starting point. A lot of people in the cable space said, okay, cable's declining, and we're going to move and focus on what's next. And we took a slightly different perspective, which we said, cable is important and it is declining, but it's going to be an important part of the ecosystem for quite some time. What we have to do is build out the other pieces of the ecosystem and structure them in a way that they can be interconnected and complementary. And so what that's allowed us to do is actually grow the overall enterprise, that's BET. So we added streaming service and studios, and we've expanded our digital. But in so doing, it allowed us to expand our relationships with talent, with our advertising partners, with content providers, and it ultimately went back and strengthened our legacy cable business. And so that business, unlike a lot of other legacy cable businesses, restored growth as well. So we have this really, it's, whether you want to call it a flywheel, a virtual cycle, like all of those kind of fun jargony terms.
Right.
But it really is about this series of interconnected platforms that support each other and pull more audience in, more revenue in, more content into our ecosystem.
I mean, you've seen an impact, top bottom line.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So when you first, BET Plus, talk to us, when you first kind of took it out, created it, what was the buy-in when you were going out to whether it was an Amazon or Apple or a Roku?
Right. Well, was
it like, yeah, got it?
Well, the starting point was a question of whether or not there was actually a need for a BET streaming service. Did
that just kind of shock you?
It surprised me, but I understood that one of the things is that the dominant streamers at the time, 2018, so you had Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, they had, in addition to spending a lot of money on content, they spent an extraordinary amount of money on marketing, right? And so they'd really done a good job of establishing perceptions and beliefs. And Netflix, to their credit, they ran an ad called Strong Black Lead. I'm not sure if most people saw it, right? But they actually targeted black media with this ad. It broke my heart. We have the biggest show on cable television, the BET Awards, and our sales guys sold Netflix a spot in the BET Awards for them to run an ad about them being Strong Black Lead. Anyhow.
We're living in unusual times.
Right. And, but I share that to say that there was a question as to whether or not the lane that BET occupies, which is super serving black consumers,
right,
whether or not people had built streaming services that satisfied the need that black consumers had in that space. It was a question because we're not arrogant. We go into this perspective and say we anchor our insights in research. So we did a lot of research. Long story short, what the data showed us was that black consumers actually were streamed more media than any other demographic group. That was the good news. Then our data told us that black consumers were extraordinarily happy with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. That was a little alarming. But when we asked the third question, that's when we saw our lane, which was when we asked them, how satisfied are you with the black content that these general entertainment streamers provide? We saw double-digit declines in the top 2 box scores. And we said, there's our opportunity. And the second piece I like to share is that we looked at the top shows watched by general audiences on Netflix at the time and the top shows watched by black audiences on Netflix at the time. Right. And one of the top 5 shows among black viewers was The Office. Now, The Office is amazing, and it's really great, but there's actually no universe in which it's a top 5 show with black viewers, right? And it really evidenced that, in fact, people were consuming that because the content they want wasn't on the platform.
Right.
And so it was really our lane to then say, we build a platform.
So in other words, when you can't really find what you want.
That's right, you'll consume something else, exactly right. And so, long story short, what we said was our opportunity was to build a platform that went really deep in providing the content that our community wanted as a supplement to general entertainment, right? Not as competitive with general entertainment providers. And then when we saw, to your point, when we went out and we had to speak to the platform providers, you have to go to Roku and you have to go to Apple and you have to go to Amazon and say, we're going to launch this service, will you be supportive? And we showed that statistic that very high appreciation by black viewers of the streaming services, but significantly lower appreciation of the black content. The folks at Amazon said, that's exactly what our data says, and we're really looking forward to supporting this initiative.
Wow. And it's essentially realizing that the market was missing out on a whole audience. Talk to us, you do create some incredible content.
I appreciate that.
So talk to us about some of the deals that you're making with individuals, because this is it's a big part of your growth story. It's about meeting what your customers, what the black audience wants to watch. You've made deals with Taraji B. Henson, Lee Daniels, Gabrielle Union, Tyler Perry.
Right.
All of this a game changer?
Yeah, absolutely a game changer. The starting point really, when we started recrafting BET for the future, was entering to a strategic partnership with Tyler Perry. And that was really the first of a number of key steps that we made to transform BET. And it's worked really well. He's been an amazing partner. It was extraordinarily challenging to pull off.
Well, wait, let's talk about that. And this is, I think, a great lesson for everybody. This is something you thought about a long time ago.
Yes.
And suggested it to the folks at Viacom.
Yes.
Like so how many years ago?
We
was it 2000?
Yeah, 2006, 2007 was when we started. I started evangelizing about the merits of BET doing a partnership with Tyler Perry, and the analog that I use is that if you accept that BET is to the black community what, say, Disney is to children, that when Pixar came along, right, we all know it was hugely disruptive to Disney, and it really took them off of their game with respect to creating content for kids. Tyler Perry was a similar phenomena. BET was thriving. He entered the television landscape, and his content was transformative, much like Pixar's animated movies were transformative. And BET did exactly what Disney did. We tried to compete with them and what have you, and realized that Tyler was singular in creating a particular type of content that resonated with audiences. And my view was we shouldn't try to out-Tyler Tyler. We should partner with Tyler, bring him into the BET ecosystem.
We should be with Tyler.
Right, we should be with Tyler. We should allow him to thrive and flourish in our ecosystem, and then the rest of BET can do the things that it's really great at, much like Mr. Iger did with Pixar, right? And eventually they stopped competing, they brought them into the ecosystem. They bought them. We did not buy Tyler. He's not for sale, to be clear. Right, Tyler, I said that. But so you can partner with Tyler, and we brought him into the ecosystem, and in bringing him in, he has flourished in a way that exceeded all of the success that he had prior. And also BET has flourished. And so it is very much like the Disney Pixar dynamic. But in 2008, we tried to sell it in. Ultimately, we couldn't get buy-off at the Viacom corporate level because Tyler, it was a big undertaking. And then we came back to it in 2017, and we're able to get it done.
Tougher to get it done and a little bit more expensive?
You know, the trick is if you don't move early and, you know, people have
Trust your
extraordinary,
gut.
that's right, if people have extraordinary success, you'll have to pay for that.
Well, there's one fun nugget to this story because Tyler Perry actually had to, break up with Oprah to do this?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I didn't have a relationship with Tyler, so when in 2016, 2017, we got a green light to go and pursue this, the issue was Tyler was in a deal with Oprah and Discovery Networks. And so the issue was, okay, it's challenging enough when, you know, we understood he was going to come to the end of his deal, and so the view was, can you get him to not renew and come with you?
Right.
And so you're always comfortable competing with other companies, but you're really not comfortable competing with Oprah Winfrey. And they're right, and they were great friends. And but long story short, Tyler had a vision for what he could do in partnership with BET and then Viacom, now Paramount.
Yeah.
And he was able to articulate that vision and why he thought it was a unique opportunity to Oprah. And she generously understood and said, we can still be friends even if you leave me. So it worked out.
You don't want to tick off Oprah.
Right.
Were you a little nervous, though? That was a big deal. And I know, I'm not asking about the terms, but I'm assuming it was expensive. Were you a little nervous? I mean, that's risk.
Yeah,
I mean, you know he
yes.
is very successful, but it was a risk.
Right. It was tremendous risk. It was tremendous risk. And so what we had was extraordinary high conviction. And that conviction was anchored in all of the analysis and research that we've done with respect to really understanding how his content performed relative to other content, relative to other price points. And it gave us extraordinary conviction. Now, we had to use 150% of that conviction to actually get the deal done. And it was understood that if it didn't work, that the consequences would be profound. But because we were so anchored in that conviction.
I might not be talking to you
right,
today.
yeah, I think it's fair. Without question, there have been key, no, it's true.
Yeah.
There have been key points where you've had to put your career on the line for these high conviction plays, high risk, high conviction plays. And I think to the credit of Bob Bakish, the CEO of Paramount, when we walked him through the logic of it, he said he saw the logic. He said he appreciated that it was a risky undertaking, but that the logic made sense, and he supported the initiative. And actually, the partnership has over-delivered, and it then set us up for the next big idea that we wanted to take. And we said, okay, we've done that one worked, here's the next big idea. So
I just think it's, you know, when you told me the story the first time around, I just thought about like lessons learned, right? And you said sometimes, yeah, it's really risk, but if you have, you know, very risky, but you've got high conviction around it, you've done your work, you got to go for it.
That's right.
The other thing is, this is something that you worked on 10, 12 years.
Right.
Or didn't let it go away. You
Right.
still knew, and you just had to have the right time. And I just think it's a great lesson because it's paid off.
Right.
And it's provided you guys a lot of momentum.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's a perspective around what are the single biggest strategic levers in your business. You know, for example, we launched a studio in 2000 and at the end of 2020, beginning of 21. That idea was an idea that I actually pitched in 2001.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Is this Content for Change?
Well, this was actually the BET Studios where we created a separate venture and we provided equity to top Black creators.
Right.
Kenya Barris came in, Gabrielle Union, Taraji P. Henson, others came into this venture. But the issue was, again, having a perspective for a strategic perspective for your base business and how it can evolve. And so I always say I'm either a really bad salesperson because you pitch something in 2001, you can't do it until 2021. And similarly with Tyler. But each of these things, as we've launched them and landed them, they've created outsized value and they've really positioned BET to continue to grow.
Well, and actually, and forgive me, because Content for Change is, you launched this, and this is to address the way racism and racial inequities are perpetuated in media. It's something we talk about a lot here at Bloomberg. But you do think of your Black consumer in a big way, and you think of the Black community and what they need on all different levels. You did it during COVID. You raised $20 million for a COVID relief specifically for the Black community. I mentioned launching for Content for Change. And this whole idea, one of the conversations we have so much about the inequities in this world is it's about creating wealth. It's not income equality, it's creating wealth,
That's right.
generational wealth. And that's what you're doing with working with content creators and giving them some equity. This is a game changer.
That's exactly
But
right.
community, we talk about cultures at companies and having a North Star. You are constantly thinking about the Black community.
That's exactly right.
In so many different ways. How did the pandemic and George Floyd just kind of crystallize that for you?
It really...
I'm sure it was there anyway.
It was there, but it crystallized it in this extraordinary affirmation of the importance of BET. Not BET today, but BET forever. And the team at BET, BET's thriving today, and that's a beautiful thing, but we're really focused on ensuring that BET will be thriving 15 years from now. Because it's the only entity that exists to play the role that we play, and I think the two examples you cite are perfect. So the first was, when COVID hit, obviously, it impacted everyone around the world, everyone around the country. Because of our extraordinary focus on our community, and not just we're a research-based organization, right? We don't do things by gut. We do everything by research. So we had all of the data that spoke to all the things: disproportionate health conditions, disparate economic resources, concentration in industries that were going to be disproportionately impacted by COVID.
The inequities continue,
yes,
right?
And the dearth of financial cushions on which to fall back. So we understood that the impact of the pandemic on the Black community was going to be absolutely disproportionate relative to other communities, and that the world was scrambling to respond to the general, but we had to respond to the specific. And so we said we have to very quickly raise money to support Black Americans who are disproportionately affected. The government and lots of other organizations are going to try to help everybody, but the needs are going to be even greater because for all those reasons I just said. And so we worked with leaders in the Black community, some of our biggest corporate partners. We worked with our parent company. We worked with philanthropic institutions, and in about 2.5 months, raised just under $20 million specifically to support Black Americans who were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And I was struck because one of the groups that we engaged was there's a group of Black senior managing directors at Morgan Stanley. And so they made decisions that they would individually contribute, but then they presented the materials to the Morgan Stanley Foundation. And the Morgan Stanley Foundation came back and said, we're going to contribute as well, because this is in fact the only vehicle in the country to assist Black Americans who are impacted by COVID, right? And so it's kind of a but-for BET thing, and that's the thing that gets us excited about coming to work every day, that we can do those things. And then Content for Change, very quickly, similarly, our view was throwing money at this issue is not the solve, right? And we spent a lot of time thinking about it and said at the end of the day, the underlying cause of kind of these lethal encounters between police and the Black community, the underlying cause is racism. Right? You can do a bunch of things, but the underlying cause is racism. And we said, is there something we can do to try to impact that? So we took a giant step backwards and said, well, we're a media company. We understand content is used to shape perspectives, beliefs, narratives, even actions and behaviors.
Right.
So can we actually work to identify specific narrative devices and techniques that can be used in content to counter-program racist beliefs and narratives, and ultimately try to, the language we use is inoculate America from racism. It turns out, I assumed we could just go to academia and say, tell us those 5 things, and we could take them, we could share them. We went out and we met with all these academics, and they said, actually, nobody knows what they are. I said, okay, that'll slow us down. But having said that, we played the role that's unique to ourselves. We figured out in which institution we thought was best positioned to actually do the research and identify the techniques. Where we partnered with the Spark Institute at Stanford University, behavioral sociologists and psychologists, and we're actually engaged in an exercise, the researchers there, to specifically identify narrative devices and techniques that can counter-program racist narratives and beliefs. And once we establish those at scale, quantifiably determined, we will then share them with a broad array of content producers, not just BET's producers, but across Paramount Global, across the entire media ecosystem. And so you can insert these devices and techniques into your content to start to change beliefs and harmful beliefs and perceptions.
I mean, part of such to have the conversation and then give them tools, right? Like, to think differently when they approach a project. Hey, one thing I want to ask you, full transparency, I came across this question that you were asked in an interview in Entrepreneur earlier this year. So I'm not stealing it, I'm just borrowing it and giving credit to the content creator. But the question I thought was really smart. You're the chief executive of an established legacy brand. How do you know when to innovate and push the brand forward without betraying its classic appeal?
I love that question. And what we've done with BET is to really understand what makes BET special. Where should we be and where shouldn't we be? I was hired by Bob Johnson at BET in 1997. And he'd taken the brand and he'd put it in a lot of different places. There was BET clothing and BET makeup and BET credit cards and BET restaurants. And at the time, I had a perspective that we should actually figure out what is the framework for the deployment of the BET brand, because it's not clear it extends to all of these places. And what we've landed on is a framework that actually governs the success of where we deploy the BET brand, is that BET can thrive at every intersection of content, community, and culture. And once you understand that, and once you really anchor yourself in that, every intersection of content, community, and culture, as business people, we can look at the landscape today and say, where are those intersection points? Of those intersection points, which ones are actually compelling businesses? Because there are a lot of intersection points that are not compelling businesses.
Right.
But where everyone intersection is a compelling business, we've gone and built leadership positions in streaming, in digital, in studios, in linear. And as we look at the landscape going forward, with that construct, it governs where we play, where we build businesses, where we focus. And it also governs where we don't play. There are places that
So you say no to a lot of things.
Say no to a lot. Because there are a lot of places, it's not simply, it's a place that's relevant to Black consumers. That's too narrow, right? That we won't, it's not simply, it's a place that where content is relevant, right? It literally has to be the intersection of content, community, and culture.
All right, so then, I was thinking of the chart we showed. So how do you grow that ecosystem? Where does the growth come from?
So there are lots of ways, because and it's really fun because we're having so much fun. We are really growing and thriving, and obviously that creates lots of opportunity.
But even with increased competition, there's so much. The one thing we talk about. I mean, you guys are a media company.
Yes.
There's so much media out there, right? There's social, there's traditional, there's all the streaming services. Yes. I can't even keep track of it. And they're all competing for our time at a time when we're coming out of the pandemic and people want to go back out in the world and actually do things. So. Right. Okay, so then how do you grow the ecosystem within that?
Well, the way you grow the ecosystem is, and part of the reason we focus on the fact that they're interconnected and supporting and complementary platforms, is because each platform makes the other platform stronger. So we window our streaming content on our linear platform, and what that does is it massively increases the depth and breadth of the original content on our linear platform in a time where so many others are actually reducing the content on their platform, linear platforms. And so that's a natural opportunity to just take share. So we're taking share in that space. Okay. And then similarly, as the cable landscape shrinks, there's a lot of pressure on advertisers who seek to reach our audience and our community in high-value premium environments. As the landscape shrinks, there are fewer of those environments. So it makes the BET environment, the last environment at scale, even more valuable than it was before. So having that perspective, and then as we build the ecosystem and more talent comes into our ecosystem, it creates even more opportunities. And so we're finding that this combination of these unique capabilities that exist in BET, we have a singular sales team, this beautiful thing, and I think I can say this, Mark Pritchard, the Chief Brand Officer at Procter & Gamble, he was recently being honored at an event, and he took a moment to acknowledge his fellow honorees, and one of his fellow honorees was the President of Media Sales at BET, Louis Carr, my colleague. And Mark, when he was acknowledging everybody, he says, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Louis Carr has played an extraordinary role in the evolution of Procter & Gamble's understanding of the value of the Black consumer market, right? And it's through those types of capabilities, right, applying them on these opportunities allows us to continue to grow.
All right, I've got to wrap up, but yes, I have 3 quick rapid-fire questions. A question every leader should be asking themselves today when it comes to their customer. Quick answers.
Are you relevant?
Are you relevant? What is something you think we should all keep an eye on for clues about trends that may impact the growth and direction of our world?
I think the biggest driver as a person in media, the single biggest driver has always been technology. Understanding that technology it's always creating new opportunities and creating new risks. And if you just build that into your DNA, that you understand that literally the cards will be reshuffled, redealt every 5 years because of technology, and just accept that and be prepared for that, I think that's it.
Love that. Last question. If you have 20 minutes, if you find you have 20 minutes of found time in any given workday, how would you spend it to further grow your business and strategy or to connect better with your customer?
I believe in the power of yes.
And you can say meditating or taking a walk.
Right.
That's okay too.
Right. Well, for me, I think it's the power of yes
Power of yes.
The power of yes. And what I mean by that is it's really easy as busy executives to say, no, I can't do this. No, I can't do that. I can't do this lunch. I can't meet with this group. I can't attend this event. And for me, it really is the power of yes. Say yes, open up, be exposed to new people, new experiences, new consumer opportunities, and then lean into them.
Scott Mills, thank you so much. What a great way to kick it off. Scott Mills, BET.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.